Hello viewers, here is a Lakewood 3rd generation box fan, and unlike the one that I showed a couple of days ago, this one is much more typical. I believe this is a Model 223. Yes, it is. There's the informations. And this one must be a fairly recent make. Maybe, I don't know how far these went, but the plug is polarized, so it's got to be 90s at earliest. There's the informations on the motor. Let's see if we can peep it through this way. Really? There we go. It's only 1.7 amps, so the motor is getting less powerful compared to the previous iterations of the 223. But again, I don't think these are really all that cheap. You still have a good motor. You still have a reasonable blade set. These were thin enough that they decided to include feet, but I don't think any of the feet are still in existence. I never see these with the feet. The speed control is kind of a weird color. I don't know if it's just faded from the sun or if this is an oddball. It looks kind of like an olive green to me. And the handle is in terrible condition. It's all screwed up from the sun. There's a funny story behind this fan, one of which we'll probably never know the answer to. But many years ago, there was a house just down the road from my grandparents' house that had a 3rd generation box fan like this in the window, and it was there for many years. In the summer, the window would be open and the fan would be running on low, and then when it was cooler out and throughout the winter, the window would be shut, but the fan would still be in front of it. It was kind of unusual. The fan was there, I would say, easy a decade, and it was always going in the summer. And then in a couple years ago, the fan disappeared, and then I found this one, and I can't help but wonder if this is that same one, because this fan was a rare instance where I purchased it locally. And I just can't help but wonder if this was the same fan, because this fan clearly spent most, if not all, of its life in a window. The rear guard is horrifically yellowed compared to the front. It was clearly sun-beaten all of its life. The handle is totally corroded from the sun. Meanwhile, the front isn't too bad. So if this wasn't the fan, well, we'll probably never know if it was or not, but if this wasn't the fan, this must have been used in a very similar situation where it spent all of its life in a window. I don't know if the video is really capturing just how yellowed that thing is, you know, compared to something that's white like this. It's really bad. And it's super brittle too. You can just hear it. So, by some miracle though, and none of the slats are broken. I don't trust the handle. I don't use it anymore. It's too deteriorated. This does have the punch outs available for the stand. And I have not serviced this yet. It's still in asphalt condition. I'm really kind of dreading cleaning this up because of how brittle the guards are. You know, you got to be very careful with it, and they're kind of a pain in the neck to clean up anyways. I had received a comment at one of my other videos. They said, I forget who it was, but the individual said that these were as cheap as box fans ever should have gotten. And that was a really interesting point, because I agree these were as cheap as box fans ever should have gotten, because these were cheap, but they were still a good product, and if you took care of it, it probably would last 50 years or more, and it had good performance. This particular one, the blade is kind of flaky. It's super out of balance, and it has like remnants of the mold around the tips. This one's particularly bad, and this is highly audible while the fan is running. You can hear that there's something whirring around on the blades that's irregular. So when I do service this, I need to go through and sand the tips of the blades so that they don't have that on there, because the sound is very annoying to me. And it will also have to get balanced, because it is very far out of balance, which is odd because the clock is pretty decent. Anyway, so let's go ahead and plug this thing up. We're testing at 119 volts, so it's a bit low today. Start with amps. And the bearings they're free still, but they haven't been lubricated likely since the fan was produced. So the spin down time is not going to be what it should be. And the switch is very squeaky. I have to fix that as well. So we'll start off on the low. And these did still have the nice quiet low speed, as you can now hear or not hear, because it's very quiet. It's a very nice gentle breeze, very steady, very calm. I find this very pleasant. And it's pulling 0.63 amps, 51 watts, and a power factor of 0.7, which is pretty typical for the shaded pole motor. These utilize 6-pole shaded pole motors. Very quiet, runs very smooth and low. Makes an excellent fan for a bedroom window. You can already feel the blade shaking. I don't know why it's so bad on this one. It's terrible. It's almost like a Holmes blade. Okay, let's go up to the medium. I always felt the speed range on these was pretty good. Medium is not outrageous. It's moving a lot more air than low, but it's still pretty quiet. I think the blade set was generally pretty good too. A lot of people produce commentary on this blade set, and I think it's kind of uncalled for. And you can see here, I'm sure the camera will be removing some of the shaking from the image stabilization. But you can probably see there just how badly it's out of balance. And it's really ridiculous. Power draw is 0.96 amps. The watts is 84 the watts. The power factor is 0.74. Yeah, it's moving a pretty strong breeze now. And it's doing so pretty quietly. But the balance is just atrocious. Okay, let's go to the high. That is 1.83 amps, which is right around what it traded for. 162 watts and a power factor of 0.74. It's got a good velocity at this speed. It's pretty powerful. Probably one of the worst balanced Lakewoods I've ever seen. And despite never having been oiled, the bearings are still perfectly content. And this is a rare case where I think the unit is pretty high hours despite it being fairly clean. Because if you take a peep into the motor here, there's a lot of dust in there. Certainly not consistent with the amount of dust that's on the blades. So I think this was definitely cleaned at some point. And I mean, there is actually, it looks like there's a lot of oil in there, so maybe it was oiled at some point. I tend to doubt it, but then again, if somebody is going to take the time to clean up a fan, perhaps they did know enough to oil it. I don't know. It's definitely been cleaned at some point, because the amount of dust that's on here is not consistent with how much dust is in the motor. So anyways, there is the Lakewood 3rd generation 223 box fan.